On June 14, when the price of Bitcoin hovered around $39,000, Microstrategy announced that they took on a new loan of $500 million to purchase new Bitcoin. It adds to the earlier $1.6 billion total loans where they bought Bitcoin with. Until 2028, they pay 6.125% interest on this new loan every single year. And that 6.125% may not seem a lot in percentages, but it's more than $30 million in interest they need to pay yearly. Times 7 years, and that's $120 million in interest in total. And this new $500 million loan is called a senior secured debt. Secured debt means that MicroStrategy's assets back that debt. In other words, if they can't pay the yearly interest on the $500 million loan, the loan goes into default, meaning MicroStrategy's assets they put up as collateral may be sold to cover the debt. In the latest financial statement of the year 2020, they talk about the possible risks. And one of those risk factors is not having enough cash coming in from their business to pay for their total debts. So how healthy is MicroStrategy's company? What are the chances of them not paying the interest on the debt and paying back the debt in full? So when looking at the company's healthiness, the most important thing is by looking at how much money they make with their core business, since that is the most likely to continue in the future. So last year in 2020, MicroStrategy generated $389 million in gross profit. That's the total revenue minus the costs. That's an 81% profit margin, which is common in software companies. So the famous investor Warren Buffett explains that he believes consistency is key in finding great businesses. Meaning, you want to find businesses that perform great over a more extended period and not just 1 or 2 years. The yearly revenue of MicroStrategy is pretty consistent, although it is declining a bit from $513 million in 2016 to $480 million in 2020 last year. The same goes for their gross profit. $420 million in 2016 to $389 million in 2020. Looking at the bottom line income, it varies from a loss of $1 million in 2019 to a profit of $92 million in 2016. In other words, and I'm not an accountant, but looking at the financial numbers from the last few years, there wouldn't be any trouble paying that yearly interest on the loan. On June 21, MicroStrategy announced that they bought 13,005 Bitcoins for $489 million at an average price of $37,617 per Bitcoin. Within 7 years, Bitcoin need to rise to $55,000 for MicroStrategy to break even, since they took out a loan of $500 million with a 6.125% yearly interest. To reach that number, Bitcoin needs to return an average of 7% per year over the next 7 years, if I did my math correctly. The average return of Bitcoin these past 5 years was 1,350%. So we may conclude that MicroStrategy makes a pretty decent bet on Bitcoin here, although it might seem risky without first looking at the numbers. After they announced their new Bitcoin purchase, MicroStrategy's shares plunged. And maybe their stock price fell because Bitcoin price also fell after their purchase. And what is more, the accounting rules for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are a bit odd and not appealing for publicly trading companies, in my opinion. MicroStrategy sees Bitcoin as an intangible asset, meaning they need to report the purchase price of Bitcoin, and if the price of Bitcoin falls below their purchase price, they need to record a so-called impairment loss. If the price of Bitcoin goes back up again, they can't compensate that on their balance sheet. In other words, on paper they made big losses last year and this year too. For example, last year MicroStrategy reported a loss of close to $71 million. As you can imagine, that doesn't look good on the balance sheet. Of course, it's only a paper loss, but still. And you may wonder, how can they report a loss of $71 million last year when Bitcoin's price went through the roof? Those are exactly my thoughts too. It's because the moment after MicroStrategy's purchased their first Bitcoin in August last year, if I recall that correctly, the price dipped a bit below their purchase price. When the price drops below the purchase price, they need to report an impairment loss on their balance sheet. And it doesn't matter if Bitcoin's price would have doubled, tripled or quadrupled moments later. They still need to report an impairment loss. Only if they sell the Bitcoin, they report a loss or gain upon that sale. That is the reason why Microstrategy reported a total loss of $110 million in the first quarter of this year of 2021. It's because the price of Bitcoin fell below their purchase price, and therefore they needed to report a $194 million impairment loss. It'll be the same for the second quarter of this year when they publish the new quarterly report, since they purchased new Bitcoin at an average price of $37,000 per Bitcoin and the Bitcoin price dipped to $29,000 a few days later. What do you think of MicroStrategy's bold moves? Let me know in the comments. So that you know, this is the first of the 4 stories I'm sharing in this video. My name is Robin and I'm sharing interesting reads I come across in these videos. At least I find these exciting stories and hopefully you do too. If so, please like this video to let YouTube know it should recommend this video to more people. Let's quickly move on to story number 2. On June 15, Sotheby's.com, a website where you can buy art and luxury goods, announced that they are auctioning the source code for the World Wide Web as an NFT.
This is the ultimate NFT because it's the ultimate born digital artifact.
Before that code, the web was not a thing. With that code, it was a thing.
In 1989, British computer scientist Sir Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, the internet as we know it today. The sale will start today from June 23 to June 30. The bidding starts at $1,000. They're selling this NFT through the Ethereum blockchain. Ethereum is the second largest cryptocurrency. The buyer of this NFT will receive 4 things: the original timestamp files containing the source code written by Sir Tim, an animated visualization of the code, a letter written by Sir Tim reflecting on the code and the process of creating it, as well as a digital poster of the full code created by Sir Tim from the original files using Python, including a graphic of his physical signature, all digitally signed. The auction is funding initiatives that Berners-Lee and his wife support. So for how much money do you think this NFT will ultimately sell? The starting price is $1,000, but we'll see the final price on June 30. Just as a reference, the NFT Every Day's the first 5,000 days ultimately sold for more than $69 million. The almost $70 million NFT auction closed on March 11 this year. The content of this NFT is a JPEG file of 21,000 by 21,000 pixels, and it's more than 555 centimeters in width and height, or more than 18 feet. The file size is more than 319 gigabytes. So the big difference between these two sellers is that Beeble, the seller of the $69 million NFT, has more than 2 million Instagram followers and more than 380 Twitter followers and is active on other socials. So although Beeble probably gained many new followers, including myself, after the NFT sale, he probably started with more followers than Sir Tim Berners-Lee, inventor of the World Wide Web. Beeble is also a lot more active on social since he posts a new image every single day, hence the title of the NFT, the 500 days. Having such a big following will definitely help when selling something online. So I don't believe the World Wide Web NFT will beat the Beeble NFT of $69 million. What do you think? However, I do think this NFT will sell for multiple millions since it's such a big piece of our history, the internet. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. In April 2021, Interest Group surveyed 100 senior level professionals at hedge funds from around the world. An overwhelming majority of 98% expect their hedge fund to invest in cryptocurrencies in the next 5 years. The report also tells about 1 in 6 hedge funds expect to invest at least 10% of their investment holdings into crypto. And on average, they expect to invest 7.2%. Do note this survey took place in April of this year. In that month, Bitcoin reached its all-time high of more than $60,000, of only sitting at $10,000 in November last year. Of course, no one knows whether the answers would be different in the survey if they were to survey them a month later, after the Bitcoin sell-off on Friday, May 13, when Elon Musk announced that Tesla doesn't accept Bitcoin any longer. Do you think the Bitcoin sell-off would impact the answers these hedge fund CFOs gave in this survey if they surveyed them a month later? Anyhow, it's pretty crazy to see that 98% expect to invest in cryptocurrencies in the next 5 years. On June 18, a bunch of smart people published a report titling The True Cost of Digital Currencies, Exploring Impact Beyond Energy Use. The introduction explains that they estimate that Bitcoin generates 90.2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide annually. As a reference, that's close to how much countries like Argentina or Sweden generate every single year. So why should we care about carbon dioxide? Well, carbon dioxide is one of the 4 gases that contribute to global warming. And whereas we humans play a significant role in contributing to it, the effect of global warming is climate change. For example, shrinking glaciers, ice on rivers and lakes is breaking up earlier, trees are flowering sooner, loss of sea ice, accelerated sea level rise and more intense heat waves. So then again, you might say, okay, well, that's all nice and good, but what does that mean? Maybe you don't care about tree flowering sooner, or that the Arctic Ocean might become ice-free one day. Well, good point. Well, you might care about the facts that hurricanes will become stronger and more intense, increasing wildfire, insect outbreaks and tree diseases. Extreme heat will affect health, energy and agriculture. In addition, extreme heat, heavy downpours and flooding will affect infrastructure, health, agriculture, forestry, transportation, air and water quality, and more. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. As you can see, global warming and climate change jeopardize the quality of life we have here on Earth. And this, my friends, is where we circle back to the report where they say that Bitcoin generates 90.2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide annually. The report's introduction writes that there are no rules on allocating Bitcoin's carbon footprint, the so-called footprint, among investors. In other words, who is responsible for those 90.2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide? Therefore, they chose to use the most widely used method, which is proportionally dividing the carbon dioxide among all investors. So there are close to 19 million Bitcoins in circulation, and they guess that Tesla bought 39,000 Bitcoin at the beginning of this year. In other words, Tesla owns 0.21% of all Bitcoin in circulation. 0.21% of those 90.2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide is 189,200 metric tons of carbon dioxide. So in conclusion, according to that report, that's Tesla's carbon dioxide footprint of adopting Bitcoin. So dividing that number by the total carbon dioxide saved by Tesla cars in total, according to Tesla's website, that's a bit more than 1%. This way I can understand why environmental enthusiasts, to put it mildly, dislike that Tesla invested a portion of their cash into Bitcoin. And I'm not sure what Tesla's strategy was behind their Bitcoin purchase. I find it odd that they changed their minds 180 degrees 3 months after the purchase. On Monday, February 8 this year, an SEC report got published. That report states that Tesla bought $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin and expects to accept Bitcoin as a payment for the products shortly. Around 1.5 months later, Elon Musk announced that one can buy a Tesla with Bitcoin on his Twitter. Furthermore, he added that people outside the US can buy a Tesla with Bitcoin later this year too. Well, around 1.5 months later, his mind suddenly turned the other way, saying that they don't accept Bitcoin any longer. So that's pretty odd, right? They are concerned about the rapidly increasing use of fossil fuels for Bitcoin mining. In the end, they also added that Tesla doesn't sell any Bitcoin and intends to use it for transactions again the moment mining uses more sustainable energy. On June 13, Elon Musk says that when there's confirmation that Bitcoin mining uses around 50% of clean energy, Tesla will accept Bitcoin again. Do you believe Tesla starts accepting Bitcoin again anytime soon? Let me know in the comments. So that's all I got to say for this video. Make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you like this content. Also, don't forget to like the video if you enjoy watching it. Besides this news related content like this video, I also post a video of my personal finance situation every single month. In that video I share how much cash I have, how much money I invested, where I invest my money, how much I personally spent and how much I saved. I'm sharing this because that's the initial reason for me starting this YouTube channel. Sharing my financial independence journey to $2.5 million. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that video. And if you want to know more about building an online business and such, follow me on my other YouTube channel. There's a link to it in the description below. Also check out my website creatoract.com for more info related to building an online business. If you want to say hi on one of my socials, please do so. Almost every day I'm posting something new. Thank you for watching and hopefully we'll meet again soon. Bye bye.